in 1962. Bubba came in.
Well, you know, when we go
District 4 Councilman Mark Gilmore says it's time to have a housing project resident on the Housing Authority Board. He says a tenant with some insight, one who knows what goes on in the housing projects, could help the authority to improve living conditions. Gilmore says the residents need a voice on the board and pointed out that Huntsville and Birmingham have tenant representation. Gilmore's choice for the proposed position is Dorothy Wright, a project tenant for 20 years. Councilman Luther Oliver and Donald Watkins agreed with Gilmore, but council members Alice Reynolds and Bill Nunn disagreed. Nunn says there should be some tenant representation, but says the position should be filled by a man. After some discussion, the council denied Gilmore's motion, then voted instead to appoint Mrs. Ann Upchurch for the Housing Authority Board. Ms. Upchurch is not a Housing Authority tenant. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Passage of the $1,370 million education budget came early Tuesday morning. Plugs on the clocks in both houses were pulled at about 11:45 Monday night, allowing the session to continue past the final day. Agreement on a school budget, pay raises, and a general fund budget by weary state lawmakers, and with the sleepy Governor Fob James looking on, means there won't be a necessity to call a special session of the legislature. The lawmakers also agreed to give school teachers and education support personnel a 16% pay raise over a 2-year period. It's the same pay raise proposed by the House weeks ago. Legislation also provides for $800 in supplemental pay to school lunchroom personnel, but local school systems which take the money must give the workers the 16% pay raise. Systems who don't take the supplemental money will not be required to give the pay increase. State employees receive a 7.5% salary raise on top of this year's cost of living increase. They can receive up to 2.5% merit step increase on top of the 7.5% for a total 10% pay raise, but no higher. The state's new general fund budget for 1981 is $297 million. It also includes $109 million in conditional appropriations, primarily for additional money for mental health, prisons, and Medicaid. $45 million in new taxes passed by the legislature leaves the general fund budget $64 million short of meeting those conditional appropriations. A bill called the Mitchum-Kelly Act creates a state housing authority to provide low-interest loans to purchase new and existing homes. A measure affecting Montgomery County permits District Attorney Jimmy Evans to call dual grand juries. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
The American Bar Association has already testified that its members question the integrity of Fred Gray and UW Clement, but the National Bar Association, a predominantly black group, supports the two men. Robert Harris of the National Bar says charges that Clement has practiced cronyism have no basis.
When that kind of innuendo, that kind of undocumented hearsay is spread around to try and persuade others not to allow a man of Mr. Clement's character to be a member of the judiciary.
Clement also denied charges that he hasn't paid enough income taxes. He says on $40,000 of taxable income, he paid $16,000 in penalty and interest over a 2.5-year period. Many black leaders support Clement and Gray, including Coretta King, Rosa Parks, and the National Urban League. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
I can fully tell you the bottom line, it seems to me, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, is one which was suggested by an adverse witness this morning, and that is the question of whether I've paid my taxes. And I would respectfully suggest to you that on that issue, there can be no question but that I have paid my taxes. For the year in question, for example, I had a taxable income of roughly $39,400. I paid, and to be sure, it was over a 2.5-year period. I paid on that roughly $40,000 in taxable income $15,900 in the actual tax, in penalties and interest.
Coffee County has only one jail, and it's in Elba, but the county has 2 courthouses, one in Elba, the other in Enterprise. A lawsuit against the county is forcing the commission to comply with the turn-of-the-century law that requires a jail at each courthouse. One of the largest problems faced by the commission is how to pay for it, and the issue is further complicated by opposing Attorney General opinions. Former Attorney General Bill Baxley said that counties can only use a sales tax to finance jail construction, while a recent opinion from Attorney General Charles Graddick says the property tax is the only form of tax that can be used. County Commission Attorney Warren Rose says they'll ask for a declaratory judgment on which form of tax to use.
We've got to have the air cleared as to what kind of tax we can finance this thing with.
How long is it going to take for that declaratory judgment to make it through?
I'd say 60 to 180 days.
The decision to use a sales tax to finance the building of the jail was a decision reportedly made just today, even though it has been 8 months since the commission was ordered by the court to begin working on its plans. But Judge Gamble has made it clear that within the next year, he expects to see the jail begin construction. For decades, Enterprise and Elba have fought to be the only county seat, and sources say that battle is helping complicate the solution to the jail problem. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News, Enterprise.
You have, and remember, remembrance of Montgomery.
Thank you, that's very, very kind of you.
Delighted to have you here in our city. Like this, there's a firm that makes keys out of that, but we had a great big old key from the old timey thing, so we had it fixed up.
In the field of what we can offer to the Southeast, I have found that people are particularly interested in the South African development of the gasification of coal, the production of gasoline from coal. I know that your particular state has vast coal fields to the north of Birmingham and possibly even to the south. And I feel that is an area which we could cooperate with the development of new industries using coal as a basis of a major chemical industry.
We've had a combination of poorer prices for the output they produce, combined with unbelievable increases in the costs of the inputs that they use to produce this agricultural output. We've had uncertainty given the president's embargo on grains to Russia and other things. Uncertainty is the word I'd key on, and consequently in that uncertainty, bankers who've been faced with having to pay more for the money they use have had to pass this cost on to the farmers, and consequently we have several producers who might have been marginal or close to the edge last year and the year before this year are finding that they just cannot meet their obligations.
Is this necessarily the small farmer?
No, not necessarily at all. The figures say that about 40% of this state's agriculture is produced on acres that are not owned by the farmer, in other words, the tenant. And to a great extent, these have been cash payments to rent this land. In some cases, these cash rental agreements were made last year before we knew a great deal about these increases in costs, the increase in difficulty of finding loan money. And consequently, it's not the small farmer. In more cases than not, it's the newer farmer, the younger farmer, the man trying to break into agriculture. And he's finding that he's made projections that were just not correct.
We don't believe the strike will affect us in any way. We're looking forward to playing baseball out here for the rest of the season, and it'll be business as usual at Patterson Field for us.
As an owner, do you feel that possibly a long strike could adversely affect the minor leagues?
We hope that it doesn't. I think every baseball fan is upset that there is a strike, and all of us wish that there would not be one. We hope it'll help us because we feel like the baseball fan has a good opportunity to come out and see us play.
Any chance of us getting some major league players, maybe just need some batting practice?
I don't think we could afford them if they would want to come, but really I don't think so realistically. They, as members of the National Players Association and under contract with the Tigers, they have the right to strike if they want to, but they can't play for another baseball team without the permission of their big league team, and I don't think that'll be forthcoming.
James's letter to Medical Services Administrator Hope Kearns was short and to the point. It simply stated that those funds so desperately needed to keep Medicaid alive would be forthcoming. According to Medicaid's current fiscal status, the program needed $18.8 million to make it through September. Alabama's legislators made Medicaid funding their #1 priority, and Kearns is optimistic this funding will relieve the constant worry of financial crisis.
It's very difficult to effectively manage a program that's constantly opening up and shutting down, and that's basically where we have been since last July.
Kearns has been administrator just 10 months. During that time, he's seen Alabama's Medicaid program survive 4 financial crises. He says he hopes the next 10 months are a little different. With the $20 million allocated by the legislature, another $60 million pending on a federal court decision, and Governor James' blessing, Commissioner Kearns says he can't wait to see a budget in the black on September 30th, a budget that at one time was $47 million in the red. Kearns told me that from now on, all debts will be paid on time because he said he's not going through that deficit foolishness anymore. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
I think the conviction today of Mr. Engel for the buying, receiving, concealing of this particular stolen property, based on the evidence that we heard in court today, would indicate that we perhaps have put a dent in some of the interstate theft and transportation of stolen automobiles from Alabama proceeding to other states. This particular conviction was a result of a cooperative effort between law enforcement officials here in the state of Alabama, local law enforcement officials, and including the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Most of the investigative work having been done by our Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. This particular defendant, Mr. Engel, is going to be facing some other charges, and Mr. Evans is anxious to proceed to those other cases just as soon as we're able to get to court.
There were as the Thunderbirds performed their world-famous maneuvers. Each movement seemed to be better than the one before it, requiring split-second timing and precision. But the crowd favorite was this dynamic bomb burst. Thunderbird narrator Captain Pete Peterson, a Tuskegee native, says before joining the Thunderbirds, each pilot has 8 or 9 years' experience flying high-performance airplanes. He says this experience gives them a good background for flying the supersonic T-38 jets. After becoming a Thunderbird pilot, Captain Peterson says each pilot must undergo a very intensive 3-month training period.
During that 3-month period that we talk about is our training season, about twice a day, every day, 6 days a week. Once we get on the road, as we call it, the air shows are practiced within themselves, and they're rival maneuvers like we had today. So every time the guys are able to do that, it's practice in itself.
Captain Peterson says in the Thunderbirds' 27-year history, they've maintained a good safety record with only 12 accidents. Each pilot serves for 2 years, but as narrator, Peterson's the only member who will stay with the Thunderbirds for 3 years, a year narrating the show and making advanced preparations, and 2 years flying. After today's performance, the Thunderbirds will go to Atlantic City. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News. This afternoon, many spectators watched in great expectation as the 7 planes arrived at Maxwell. Each of the 7 Air Force pilots flies his T-38 jet at speeds close to 700 miles per hour, spinning, diving, and looping in razor-sharp proficiency. Going into their diamond formation, the planes fly high in the sky with only 3 feet separating each plane's wingtip. In another maneuver, one plane flies as close as 30 feet to the ground. Narrator for the Thunderbirds air show, Pete Peterson, says today's demonstration is just a sample of what will come in tomorrow's show. Peterson says the Thunderbirds will perform their trademark maneuver, the bomb burst, where they fly straight up and then peel off one by one. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
At an afternoon news conference, Dahlberg blasted AEA President Paul Hubbard, saying the AEA doesn't care for anybody but teachers, and that the dues being paid by ESPO members to the AEA are being used to further teacher interest against support workers.
The recent settlement of the Walker County strike without reaching a settlement satisfactory to support personnel, and just this week the selling out of some 7,300 food service employees by ruthless, power-hungry Paul Hubbard are just 2 examples of what I speak. With the position taken by Paul Hubbard in the recent legislative session, support personnel longer have anything in common with AEA, and we have no business in the same organization.
Dahlberg referred to a, quote, so-called salary increase for support workers, which he says will cost local school systems thousands of dollars and won't benefit school workers. He says Hubbard forbid him from lobbying the legislature on the last night of the session on behalf of salary increases for support personnel. In announcing his resignation, Dahlberg, who founded ESPO 4.5 years ago, says he intends to organize a new organization that will give the support workers the kind of organization they deserve, one that will represent the interest of its 9,000-member group. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
AUM has been without a chancellor since April, when Chancellor Hanley Funderburk became president of Auburn University. It's up to Funderburk to determine the process for selecting his successor. James Williams is the acting chancellor at AUM. He says Funderburk has put a higher priority on other matters, such as determining the university's budget.
I think that's as it should be. So because of that, he simply has not had a chance, I'm sure, at this point to decide what the process will be for selecting a chancellor on the AUM campus. In the meantime, we're trying to go ahead with our business and not lose any motion because of the fact that we don't have a permanent chancellor at this point.
Recently, the Auburn Faculty Council Executive Committee passed a resolution asking the university president to appoint a search committee for finding a new chancellor. The teachers asked that at least 50% of that search committee be faculty members. Funderburk hasn't indicated whether he'll accept that percentage or even whether he will appoint a search committee. From the Montgomery campus of Auburn University, Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
General Allen was asked how the U.S. Air Force stacks up against the Soviet Air Command. He said as far as strategical weapons are concerned, the U.S. is equal with the Soviet Union in most areas. However, he says the Soviets are building their strategic weapons much faster than we are. On the subject of conventional weapons and technology, General Allen says the U.S. is lacking.
The United States in general has less tactical forces than do the Soviets. However, the United States plus its allies are more comparable to the Soviets.
On a different subject concerning the readiness and reliability of Air Force aircraft and equipment, General Allen says the Air Force has been reevaluating its equipment maintenance system, especially since the recent Army aircraft breakdown during the attempt to rescue the Iranian hostages. Allen admits that there are some deficiencies, but he says they're expensive to correct. He says the only solution to the problem is a reapportionment of the Air Force budget. But even then, he says there would probably still be money shortages in other areas. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Independent consulting economist Dr. Frederick Wells advocates the minimum charge the power company now bills you be dropped from $3.79 to $2. The power company wants to up that figure to almost $5. At the same time, Wells says the rates per kilowatt hour could go up for both residential, industrial, commercial, and other customers. But he says the industrial customers should get a larger burden of the cost of producing electricity. His figures show that the utility is currently charging residential customers $48.40 per 1,000 kilowatt hours. That's an average monthly bill for most customers. Wells wants to see $51.90 to $52.70 charged per 1,000 kilowatt hours. The utility wants to raise those rates to $53.40. For the same 1,000 kilowatt hours, industrial customers pay only $26. Wells says they should be charging $31.20. The power company wants to charge $28.40. Under cross-examination, utility attorneys grilled Wells on his formula, charging he uses generalizations for utilities nationwide and doesn't factor in detailed specifics relating to each individual power company. Wells counters that such generalizations can be made. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
This is the home of the late Mrs. Winfred Flynn. When Mrs. Flynn found out that she was terminally ill, she said that she wanted to come home where she could die in her own bed in familiar surroundings. The week before Mrs. Flynn died, she asked us to come out, and she told us that hospice was making this possible.
And you've really come on this long journey to be a peaceful person now, haven't you?
Yes.
You're not the least bit afraid, are you?
No.
Just peacefully waiting with all the people that love you around you.
Not so peacefully. I want it over with.
You want it over with?
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe it'll be over soon.
Yep. We thought it was last night.
We certainly did think it was
But
last
y'all
night.
made me mad.
We made you mad, I know. Well, I told you, you're a feisty little devil.
I know. The old temper got gone.
Do you remember what you told me in the middle of the night last night?
No.
You told me you might be dying, but that didn't keep you from getting mad at things. And I'm glad about that.
Mrs. Flynn said you couldn't imagine the help hospice gives you. She said it isn't 1 day a week or 1 night a week, but 7 days and 7 nights. She said hospice enables you to die at home with your loved ones around you, rather than in isolation. She said it meant everything that made these last few days worth living. She said she's had an opportunity to make final plans to have things done the way she wanted them.
I'm grateful. I had some advance notice.
I know you are.
I'm very grateful for that. Most people don't.
Mrs. Flynn's closest relative, her niece, has been living with her since she came home from the hospital.
It has meant security. It has meant that I can call somebody any time of the day or night that I'm frightened, that I don't understand what's happening to my aunt. And they will send an RN who will explain to me what's going on, calm me down, calm the patient down, and we have a peaceful night. If necessary, she spends the night with us.
Mrs. Flynn died April 14th, but not before saying what was in her heart because she wanted the world to know what hospice meant to her. This is Coping, and I'm Ivy Berman.
About 40 health professionals and other citizens attended the workshop, sponsored by the Southeast Alabama Health Systems Agency and the Rural Development Committee of the Alabama Cooperative Extension Service. Speakers discussed health topics, teenage pregnancies, health clinics in rural areas, and emergency medical services. Dr. Frederick Stone from the Lister Hill Health Center says the heyday of federal funding for health projects is over. He thinks the federal government will fund only projects in which citizens have taken the initiative. And Stone says it's important that people make their neighbors aware of their community's health needs. One example is the community of Raymer, which needs a health clinic. Stone says residents there should get together with professionals and come up with a plan for a new clinic. In solving health problems, Stone says it's important that people donate their time as well as their money. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Colonel Shoemaker didn't mention the pay raise when he addressed a trooper recruit class at Selma's Criminal Justice Training Center. He says his department appreciates the support it received from some lawmakers, but it won't seek a legal opinion to decide if the legislature approved an 18% pay hike. Here's what happened to the trooper pay raise measure. The bill was left in limbo early Tuesday morning after both houses of the legislature had approved a conference committee report on the measure. But the House had adjourned sine die when the upper chamber sent the amended Senate bill to the House Speaker for his signature. And without the proper signatures, it couldn't be sent to the governor and become law. In apparent anticipation of a trooper pay raise, a bill to help fund it was passed to charge a $5 fee for driver's examinations. Another bill increases the cost of a 4-year driver's license from $10 to $15. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
The resolution would amend current teacher certification standards to allow secondary teachers the option of taking graduate-level classwork completely within his or her subject area, rather than being required to take education courses outside subject area. McMillan told the board members that the option is a progressive and immediate way to provide Alabama high schools with much-needed academic leadership.
This is a quality option that will not cost the taxpayers 1 cent, while at the same time it will provide our school children with more knowledgeable and effective teachers.
In other action, the board members passed a resolution that would change minimum standards for organizing kindergarten programs to permit local school boards to operate the kindergartens for full or half-day sessions based on local needs. The change in the resolution was made in order for a larger number of children to be able to attend public kindergarten classes. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The team received quite an impressive send-off today. State Representative James Ray and several school officials, including Troy State President Dr. Ralph Adams, turned out for the Trojans' last practice at home. Coach Chase Riddle was pleased with the reception.
Well, it seems that the legislature had passed a resolution commending Troy State on the fine baseball season they had, and that was Dr. Adams and Dr. Robinson and Dr. Gibson out to along with our athletic director, Ms. Stewart, out to read the resolution to the team. I thought that was great.
How's the team feel about all the attention they're getting?
Oh, I tell you, it's just great. It's unreal. It's just these fellows are really excited, and they thought maybe they might have a chance to win the conference. They wasn't sure of that. They won the conference, won the region, and so we're just looking forward to going to California now.
Riddle, who spent 24 years in the St. Louis Cardinal organization before coming to Troy, is proud of his squad. He calls Jack Tinkler the best all-around shortstop he's seen in his 2 years as a college coach. Pitcher Andy Giannini, his battery mate Rich Bouchelon, and center fielder designated hitter P.J. Hansen were other Trojans Riddle cited for having a good year. And it has been a year of first for the team. The Trojans won their first ever Gulf South Conference title in baseball, and when they take the field against Florida International of Miami on Saturday, it will mark Troy State's first appearance in the Division II World Series. What a coincidence that would be if the Trojans bring back their first ever national championship in baseball. In Troy, Alabama, Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
The meeting room was overflowing with parents concerned about the board's plan to place some children attending the Davis Learning Center back into regular schools. The board is attempting to comply with a federal law which says children with learning disabilities must be taught in a least restricted environment. But the parents say that sort of environment would be more harmful than helpful to their children's development. Ralph Griswold, head of the county school system special education department, explained that special services would still be provided in the regular schools and that there are plans to add more self-contained classrooms to accommodate the children. But his comments didn't seem to relieve the parents' anxieties. A few board members say they weren't aware of all the aspects concerning the Davis school controversy. A meeting has been set up between the board officials and concerned parents to further discuss the situation. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
I was called to testify by the committee because one of the allegations by the Bar Association was that Mr. Gray had been guilty of gross negligence in his handling and representation of the Industrial Development Board for the city of Tuskegee. As you know, because of people not of good character, fraudulent bonds resulted in taking advantage of monies by POWs and many other people. But that was not the fault of Mr. Gray.
The Trojans made it to the regional playoffs last year with a 33-14 record, but their season ended there. This year, Troy State is 28-10 so far, having won the regional tournament in Troy last weekend. Coach Chase Riddle says there's an interesting characteristic about this year's ball club to which he attributes their success.
We were able to go to that bench when we needed someone on the bench. If someone was going a little bad, somebody else picked him up. It was that type of thing all year. And so I think that's really, if I had to say one thing, I think it's the bench.
Riddle, who spent 24 years in the St. Louis Cardinal organization before coming to Troy, is proud of his squad. He calls Jack Tinkler the best all-around shortstop he's seen in his 2 years as a college coach. Pitcher Andy Giannini, his battery mate Rich Bouchelon, and center fielder designated hitter P.J. Hansen were other Trojans Riddle cited for having a good year. And it has been a year of first for the team. The Trojans won their first ever Gulf South Conference title in baseball, and when they take the field against Florida International of Miami on Saturday, it will mark Troy State's first appearance in the Division II World Series. What a coincidence that would be if the Trojans bring back their first ever national championship in baseball. In Troy, Alabama, Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
Zodiac Juniors, ladies and gentlemen. Zodiac Juniors.
It's got to be love. It's got to be love.
The train left Atlanta early this morning and was on its way to deliver the coal to the port of Mobile. But 10 miles west of Tuskegee, more than 24 of the cars left the track. Assistant Roadmaster James Thomas says the accident was caused by a loose part underneath the train. He says most of the coal that spilled on or near the track can't be recovered. But Thomas says right now the first priority is to clear and repair the track so that train travel can continue.
Yeah, yard in Montgomery is full of cars, need to go to Atlanta. And we also have trains in Atlanta need to come this way. So our main concern is getting the main line back in service. We can get the cars up a week or two from now. We just want to get the track built back.
Railroad workers are already on the scene clearing and repairing the track. Thomas says the track should be ready for travel no later than tomorrow afternoon. Thomas says some people from the Atlanta office will be coming in to supervise the cleanup operation, but says it could take weeks to clean up all the coal. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
The Alabama Motorists Association says there should be plenty of gasoline available if you're planning on doing any traveling this Memorial Day weekend. But state troopers and the Montgomery Police Department say they will be adding additional manpower to be on the lookout for speeders and drunk drivers.
State troopers predict 17 people will die in traffic-related accidents this weekend as compared to last year when there were 21 traffic-related deaths. Montgomery Police Chief Charles Swindle says he's calling in additional manpower for holiday patrol duty because of a recent increase in local traffic fatalities. He says there were 8 traffic-related deaths in 1979, but already 13 persons have died on city streets and roadways. Chief Swindle says he'll use federal highway funds for officers' overtime pay and says after this weekend, his men will continue the crackdown on drunk drivers and speeders. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
I know you're tired of the constantly increasing price of food, but this month, blame that 0.4% price climb on the lettuce. Alabama gets most of its lettuce from California, which experienced heavy rains during January and February, damaging much of the lettuce crop. This resulted in a shortage and consequently an increase in lettuce prices, up a whopping 16%. But that's only a temporary increase. Market experts say the shortage has subsided and prices are now on the downswing. Good news for pork lovers, though. The price of pork dropped nearly 5%. Pork chops are more than 13% cheaper than last year's price at this time, and that's not all. Bacon is down slightly more than 17%, and pork shoulder cuts have dropped almost 24%. Poultry prices are down another 1%, while dairy items and chuck roast showed slight increases. As an Alabama consumer, you're luckier than most. You can take advantage of those record prices that result from homegrown pork, and those prices should continue to drop. Poultry prices will also see a decrease through the summer. However, the price of beef will continue to fluctuate. As for vegetables, the experts say you'll be up to your ears in good bargains. And remember, locally grown produce will always be a better buy. So in the short term, it looks like pork will be the bargain buy for a Memorial Day cookout. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Because it's based on geography, on certain strengths that we have as a nation in agriculture and technology, which are permanent. You know, our agricultural strength is a consequence of geography and a consequence of the fact that we're the biggest country in the temperate zone, entirely within the temperate zone.
Well, I don't know whether they will or will not be confirmed. There were some problems in each instance. I frankly think UW has a better chance than Fred Gray, but I don't serve on that committee, so I will not have a vote on that committee. I'm going to push to see if we can't get a vote taken by the committee so some determination can be made. I've got some grave concerns myself about some of the problems that have been raised.
Good bureaucrats, good state employees, and certainly the public are very sick and tired of watching individuals take advantage of whatever they've got when they're put in a position of trust.
Bronner says all levels of state and local government in Alabama are full of corruption, even more so than most other states, and that a cleanup of white-collar crime is long overdue. He says it will take a combined effort of state, federal, and local prosecutors under the guidance of a special prosecutor to succeed in weeding out corruption in state government.
The reason I say that is simple. It has to have the financial backing of something that'll give it the money to do it. A local district attorney office fund certainly doesn't have the monies.
Concerning the recent passage of a bill allowing District Attorney Jimmy Evans of Montgomery to impanel a permanent white-collar crime grand jury, Bronner called the measure one of the biggest steps taken in the history of Alabama in an effort to clean up white-collar crime. Bronner was asked by reporters if he would be interested in the appointment as the special prosecutor, but he said he was not qualified for the job. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
I want to also say that I didn't ever say and wouldn't that we shouldn't serve as some kind of refuge for those people who are fleeing a communist nation. I've indicated that before. But there are limits to that capability in this country, particularly in these tough economic times. And that's why I felt like the administration should have perhaps worked a little more closely with our allies in this particular part of the world to help get them to help take a part of the load.
Everybody come here and say, well, young, do like good shot now, baby. Well, young, do like to stop. Oh, baby. Well, young, do like to drop now, baby. Well, young, do like to stop. Oh, baby.
After a team breakfast at 5 this morning in Troy, the Trojans and Coach Chase Riddle bus to Montgomery for the flight to the West Coast. The ball players seemed relaxed in anticipation of their first appearance in a national championship. They'll meet Florida International College of Miami tomorrow evening at 6 our time in the opening round of the double elimination tournament. The Trojans' opponents are winners of the South Atlantic region. Coach Riddle says his team is in for some tough company when they meet Florida International. Riddle says the Trojans have responded to numerous challenges already this year, and he feels they have a chance to take it all. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
Pallbearers carried an empty coffin as a symbol of those in the military who died while serving this country. This morning's ceremony was also dedicated to Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Donald Burns, a priest at Gunner Air Force Base who died recently. After the Mass, the ceremony ended with the playing of taps. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
In the wee hours Thursday morning, these Phantom II jets will take off from Montgomery's Danley Field. Their destination, Egerbeck Air Base, Germany. Their mission, to represent the United States in an international tactical reconnaissance exercise. Several cargo planes filled with vital equipment sit waiting for takeoff. There are continuous checks and rechecks of the jet's mechanisms. From the landing gear to the photo reconnaissance equipment, even the pilots take special note of their aircraft. But the planes aren't all that's under scrutiny. Air Guard personnel involved in the mission are also checked out. The 187th should do very well in the week-long competition. It was because of their outstanding past performances that the local unit was chosen to compete in Germany.
The 187th Tactical Reconnaissance Group here in Montgomery is the only U.S. military unit selected to participate. We were selected over regular Air Force tactical reconnaissance units as well as Air National Guard units.
The sleek aircraft will fly non-stop for more than 9 hours, refueling in midair. If you're awakened early Thursday morning by the continuous roar of these Phantom jets, don't be alarmed. It's just Montgomery's elite Air Guard unit taking off to show the world they're the best. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Police have investigators working overtime trying to solve a murder they describe as brutal. Police say they believe the murder was tied in with a robbery, but there are a few facts that have them puzzled. They still don't know why Bogle's car was found at a hotel near his apartment. And they haven't been able to find Bogle's eyeglasses, which he wore every day. They're asking anyone who finds a pair of gold-rimmed eyeglasses to call the police or the secret witness number. Despite the mystery surrounding the murder, police say they're still hopeful.
We're putting in more hours on it than we do a normal case because of the type case it is. We've had some good leads, but the leads so far we've ran down just didn't pan out. But we're still working on it. We still have a lot of good leads on this. It's still a good health investigation at this point.
Wobley says police think they know what the murder weapon is, though they haven't found it yet. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
County Attorney Knox Argo says the plans for converting the current law library on the upper floor of the courthouse into additional jail space will be submitted to federal judge Robert Varner. Argo says the only expansion the court knows of now is the restitution home for work release inmates, and he says he hopes the court will accept the law library conversion as further evidence that the commission is trying to ease the overcrowding in the county jail, which led to all of the litigation. There is some difference of opinion between the county and lawyers for the inmates on just how much additional space the law library can provide. The estimates range from 20 to 65. In about 5 minutes of discussion, the commission only acknowledged that the court had given them 60 days to come up with more expansion plans. Earlier, the commission had spent 2 hours discussing a district attorney's request to apply for a 100% federal grant to establish a crisis center for abused family members. The commission was concerned with the possibility of having to take over the $200,000 project if federal funds are cut off. The commissioners say they realize a need for the service, but in case of a funding cutoff, didn't want to obligate the county to spending tax dollars, which would only increase future budgets. The issue will come up again in 2 weeks. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.